Alright, we are back with our Dominaria United limited set review. We previously did the white set review earlier. I think I'm releasing it earlier in the day compared to this one. And I said I was going to go in Wooburg order. I'm going to change that up. I will, instead of moving on to blue, I will move on to multicolored. I forgot to mention, it is good to see the multicolored uncommons and commons when there are some. In this set, there happens not to be any multicolored commons. But we'll go through the uncommons before we move on to the rest of the Uberg piece of the set, because it's good to see through the multicolored cards what synergies exist and kind of what strategies they're going for. That will help lead us into judging the rest of the colors down the line, as we know kind of what the synergies are. This episode will not set upon being a strategy deep dive. We're not going to go into what all the different color pair synergies are, what their strategies are, anything like that. We're just going to review the cards as they stand, but it will touch on synergies because you need to do that in order to judge what a card's grading is. If you haven't seen the white one yet, I would recommend viewing that. I think I'm going to place that in this upper corner here, so click on that link to view that one first. I go over a little more of my order of grading and how I do it and best practices for judging a new set when it comes on out for both sealed and draft. But I will give a quick reminder of how I grade. I use an A through F scale. F is unplayable cards. Usually they're rares that are meant for constructed, but are never good in limited. Then D's are filler. So D minus all the way through D plus, where D minus is a filler card that you really want to stay away from, whereas D plus, you'll oftentimes get a couple of those in your deck to fill them in to get to 40 cards. C range is your average card. C minus is on the lower end of average, C plus on the upper end of average. Bs are cards that draw you into that color. So a B minus is a slight draw into the color, whereas B is a good draw. B plus is nearing on bombs, and most of the debate is between C pluses and B minuses. Like, are they really good average cards, or are they good enough to draw you in? And then A's are bombs. So A minus, a weaker bomb, A, big bomb. A pluses are your All-Seeing Arbiters and Warden Sanctuaries from Streets of New Capenna type cards. So without further ado, let's dive in. Our first one up is Baird, Argivian Recruiter. This has decent stats. It's a red-white. It's a 2/2 human soldier legendary creature. At the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature with power greater than its base power, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. So basically, if you pump any creatures, you can get a 1/1 at the end of your turn. Also, what makes this better than just pumping is Enlist, or anything that gives all creatures +X/+X. But the Enlist ability is an ability where I guess I won't go over the abilities in each one. We covered all of them, I think, in the white review. So Enlist ends up pumping creature power. The problem is when you enlist a creature, that creature that you've enlisted needs to survive. And it has to be attacking by definition. So, and its toughness doesn't increase, so it's easy to trade with. So, I'm not sure, Enlist definitely makes this better. I'm not sure how much better it makes it. Otherwise, this is kind of a vanilla 2/2 for 2, which is fine. I'm just going to give this a C, and we'll move on. Up next, we have Balmor, Battle Mage Captain. It's for blue and a red, a 1/3 bird wizard legendary creature with flying. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain trample until end of turn. Now, we're starting to pull me into blue-red here. While I don't want to overload my deck with instants and sorceries, blue-red is the color pair that does that the most. And giving all creatures +1/+0 on top of a base good creature, I'm in for that. So I'm going to give this a B-. It's a slight draw into the blue-red color pair. And yeah, we'll move to the next one. Next up is Elos Ilcor, Sadistic Pilgrim. White-black for a 2/2 Phyrexian Core Cleric legendary creature with Death Touch. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain a life. Whenever another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. So this is a good efficient creature. A 2/2 for 2 with Death Touch is above grade itself. And it plays well with the synergies that Black-White goes for, which is creatures entering the battlefield and creatures for white, and creatures leaving the battlefield for black. So it has a nice bonus. It's a pretty effective bonus. It doesn't blow me away, but it's an efficient creature that really has nothing but upside here. So I'm going to give this a B- as well. I do think this is a slight pull into white-black. Up next, we have Wrath Weatherlight Stalwart, white-blue for a 1/3 human wizard legendary creature. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control. If you do, draw a card. It also has the ability, 3 white-white, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain vigilance until end of turn. That is an expensive ability. It's a nice one that helps you finish the game and not leave yourself vulnerable. Give all your creatures, +1/+1, and vigilance is a big piece of that. So it's definitely an upside, but it's a decent stat defender that lets me draw cards, for instance, on my opponent's turn. Sure, I will do that. So, yeah, 1/3, 2 for 1/3, not all that impressive, but I like the opportunity to draw cards, and you might even be able to get multiple activations of this. So I'm in for this as a B-, a slight pull into blue-white. Next up, we have Vojar Voldalien Desecrator. It's blue-black for a 1/2. Tap, draw a card, then discard a card. If you discarded an instant or sorcery card this way, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Pay 2, sacrifice it. You may cast target instant or sorcery from your graveyard this turn. If that spell would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. Activate only as a sorcery. So, this card was a little bit hard for me to judge. It has okay stats early and does looting abilities, which is nice. Late game, you have to pay the 2 to sacrifice it, and then you still have to pay the instant or sorcerer's mana cost as well to cast it from your graveyard. So it has play early, it has play late with it, so it has the whole modality thing going on, but none of it's extremely good. I really wish this was like a 2/2, maybe a 2/1 for its cost. I'm going to give this one a C-. Who knows? We might come up on it. I see this as one of the weaker uncommons we've gone over. One of the weaker uncommons in the set. Alright, next up, Aaron Benaglios Ruin, white, black, for a 3/3 Phyrexian human legendary creature with menace. Pay white, black, tap it, sacrifice another creature, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Alright, so a 3/3 menace for 3 is good stats. My problem is, I don't like paying white, black. That's a lot of colors here for a set that, you're gonna maybe want to even tip into 3 colors potentially. And having that on a card that's more expensive wouldn't be a problem, but really you'd like to get this down on turn 3 if possible, and so who knows if you're going to have white, black turn 3. But other than that, it's a good card. The ability is quite powerful. White, black, tap, sack a creature, +1/+1 on all creatures. It sucks that you have to sacrifice a creature because that takes away from the creatures that would get +1/+1 counters on it. It kind of eats away from its own goal. And because of that, I have this as a C. We'll see where it goes. I think it'll be powerful in some games and less powerful in others. There is a lot of 1/1 creatures running around, it looks like, especially token creatures, so it helps, but you really don't want to be sacrificing them too often to use this. But it does +1/+1 itself as well, which is nice. So yeah, I have it as C right now. I really value the consistency. If this was any less mana and colors, I would up it to a C+. All right, next up, we have Legamos Hand of Hatred, 1 black-red for a 1/3 human shaman legendary creature. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 2/1 red elemental creature token with trample and haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. And just for those that don't know, next end step means the very next end step, not skip one and go to the next end step. So you do sacrifice this on your turn. Tap it, search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Activate it only if 5 or more creatures died this turn. Alright, so a 1/3 for 3 isn't horrible. It's a little less than great, so it's not that impressive. It does make a 2/1 every turn, and those 2/1s could be used to enlist for other creatures. They could be used to sacrifice, and it kind of helps feed the idea of killing more creatures as a 2/1. It's gonna die. Maybe it takes out a blocker. And so that's 2 of the 5 creatures you need to have die that turn. And you probably want to be attacking out quite a bit with this, and black-red typically does that anyway. So, you know, while the big ability of search, tutor any card in your deck, put it into your hand, is hard to trigger, it is powerful when you do. So with all that, I have this as a C+. I think it's a good card. Not quite enough to pull me into black-red, but I think it'll see a good amount of play. Up next, we have Queen Alino of Rua. I know I'm butchering these names, but it's a star legendary creature elf noble. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control. If 1 or more creature tokens would be created under your control, those tokens would be created. Yeah, those tokens plus a 1/1 white soldier creature token are created instead. So anytime a resolved effect puts tokens into play, create an extra one, or at least an extra 1/1. And this card is too much colored to reliably play early. So again, we have white, green within there. The other thing I don't like about this card is that order really matters. You need to be playing this early before you're playing all the things that would create your tokens. And in order to get the extra 1/1, which is really where the power comes in. It's still pretty decent because with these colors, you're going to have a lot of creatures on the battlefield is the idea, kind of go wide. So you should, and it counts as a creature itself, so you should reliably be able to get this above rate as a, 3/3, 4/4, 5/5, etc. But it's just a high-powered toughness creature that when you are losing the game and they're killing your creatures, just gets even weaker. So it's sort of, if you're winning, you win more. If you lose, you're losing more. And those kind of cards aren't usually that powerful. You want cards that will help you win the game when you are on the verge of losing the game. With all that, I have this as a C. We will see where it goes later on, but right now I'm judging this as a C. All right, up next, Tatyova, Steward of Tides, green, blue for a 3/3 Merfolk Druid legendary creature. Land creatures you control have flying. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if you control 7 or more lands, up to 1 target land you control becomes a 3/3 elemental creature with haste. It's still land. Okay, so this is one where I don't mind as much the green, blue, because I'm not looking to play this on turn 3. If I don't have a turn 3 play, I can play it turn 3, which is nice, so it has some modality, and it's not a horrible creature at that point. But really, you're looking to play this later on, such that when you're playing your 7th and 8th land, you make them creature lands, right? And let them have flying. So I think that is reasonably powerful. It takes a little long to get going, so this is really about how long are these games going to go. I do get the sense that this format will be a little bit slower than we have seen in a lot of other formats previously. Like, I think it will be slower than Streets of New Capenna. But You know, it's we'll see really how slow it is. I think this will win a lot of games. I still think it's a little slow to activate. So with that, I'm giving it a C. Up next, we have Urg, Spawn of Turg. Black, black, green for star 5. It's a frog beast legendary creature. Urg, Spawn of Turg's power is equal to the number of land cards in your graveyard. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may put that card in your graveyard. Pay black, green, sacrifice a land, you gain 2 life. Alright, so really the power here is that it filters lands for when you don't need to draw them, and is a decent blocker in the meantime. I'm not really into sacrificing lands too much. I mean, it's nice to be on there, and as you get flooding out of lands, you can sacrifice your lands. This will grow in power, which is nice. And it has threat of activation of that as well, so that's nice. And the gaining 2 life to kind of race your opponent is nice too. But the real power here is stacking the top of your deck, making sure that when you don't need lands, you can put them into your graveyard. That said, I don't see this getting enough power to be that great of a creature, and it really doesn't do anything else besides stack those cards. I'm giving this a C- for right now. Yeah, we'll see. I don't really see this going up a whole lot more than that, maybe up to like a C, but I'm giving it a C-. Up next, Garna, Bloodfist of Keld. 1 black, red for a 4/3 human berserker legendary creature. Whenever another creature you control dies, draw a card if it was attacking. Otherwise, Garna, Bloodfist of Keld deals 1 damage to each opponent. Alright, so you have a 4 mana 4/3, which is fine base rate. Its ability is insane, and part of the way to judge cards is how quickly they give you their advantage, because big threats that come on out could be removaled away, and so you want the advantage to come out quickly. If you play this pre-combat main phase and attack out, your other creatures that die will draw you a card that turn. And it can trigger multiple times. If you have multiple creatures that die, you'll draw multiple cards. And even if it wasn't attacking, you still deal 1 damage to your opponents. With all that, I was debating between B+ and A-. I think I'm going to go A- on this one. This is kind of a mythic uncommon. We've seen a couple of those, I guess. We've seen one in white. I won't spoil what it was. But I still think this one's better. But yes, I'm going to give this one an A-. We'll see. Maybe I'm high on this for some reason, but I like this card. All right. We have next Najal Avizoa Aeronaut. It's 2 green blue for a 2/4 Elf Scout legendary creature with flying, and it has domain. Whenever Najal Avizoa Aeronaut deals combat damage to a player, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. Put up to 1 of them on top of your library and the rest on the bottom in a random order. Then, if there are 5 basic land types among lands you control, draw a card. Alright, so looking at the base rate, and again, you'll notice a pattern of this. What do you get natively from your permanent that you're putting into play? A 2/4 flyer for 4 is reasonable base rate, maybe even a little above average. We've seen some 2/3s be for 4 mana before. So that's decent in and of itself. The ability to, when it deals damage, look at X cards and stack your deck as you would like. That is a pretty good ability. It's not quite drawing a card, but it sets you up quite well. It would be much better if it drew a card. I would give it even higher if it did, for sure. But I think the base rate with the ability to stack your deck makes this a B-. I'm not really adding a whole lot for the draw card for if you have 5 basic land types. I think there will be decks that will want to see that, and I think that's what they're kind of getting at. They wanted not to make it overpowered, but give it an ability to get you to draw a card, but it takes a lot of work to get there. So I'm kind of writing that one off. B- it is. Next up, we have, once it loads, Radha Coalition Warlord. 2 red-green for a 3/3 Elf Warrior legendary creature. Whenever Radha Coalition Warlord becomes tapped, another target creature you control gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. Alright. Remember, there's a lot of these cards that say when it becomes tapped. Part of that is because of Enlist. So this works really well with Enlist. You tap this, give something else with Enlist, +3/+0, and also give it +X/+X, where X is the number of basic land types you control. Now, in and of itself, base rate 4 mana for a 3/3, not impressive. I'm really looking for more than that, especially since its domain ability doesn't really happen on defense. So on defense, this is purely a 3/3. And just beefing up another creature isn't enough. I gave this a C. And that's, yeah, what I gave it. Up next, we have Rhona Sheoldred's Faithful. 1 blue, black for a 3/4. Human Wizard legendary creature. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, each opponent loses 1 life. You may cast Rhona Sheoldred's Faithful from your graveyard by discarding 2 cards in addition to paying its other costs. I like cards that come back from the graveyard, but while I like doing that, discarding 2 cards is a pretty hefty cost to get that. And it is just a base 3/4 creature. Now that's not horrible for 4. I would like to see a 4/4, but it does have that extra, if you instant or sorcery, each opponent loses 1 life. Helps offset that a bit. But later in the game, when you are flooding out, you may get extra lands that you do not need to play. And if you have this card, you do not want to play those lands. You want to keep those to be able to discard them to effectively trade 2 lands for another creature card, which is this card coming back. I do think that's reasonably powerful. It's expensive to do with the 2 cards, but I'm going to give this a C. It's not great base rate. It comes on back, which I like. Originally, I was looking to grade this lower, but I don't think I can because it is really nice late game when you're flooding out to get an extra card and have that advantage. So I'm giving it a C. And honestly, I could see it going up to a C+. I think it depends on how games play out, how long they go, and if this set really will be a resource set where everyone's killing each other's stuff, you run out of cards, you have nothing left to do, and then everyone's just drawing into their stuff. Well, if you can, trade your land draws for an extra effective permanent, that could be powerful and win you the game. But I'm giving it a C for now. Up next is Roulettes Warchief. It is a 1 for 1 red, green, a 3/3 goblin legendary creature with menace. Whenever Roulettes Warchief attacks, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield tapped. If you didn't put a card onto the battlefield this way, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. Alright, so this clears you from drawing your lands while getting lands onto the battlefield for free, and also, when it doesn't do that, puts creatures onto the battlefield. As a 3/3 menace for 4, that's pretty good return right there. And clearing out your draws and getting lands on the battlefield and getting small creatures on the battlefield, that's a lot of different payoffs. I'm going to give this a C+. That's what I had. I'm going to stick with what I originally had. As I'm reading through it, I'm kind of wondering if this will be more of the B- range and kind of pull me into red-green. We'll see how that plays out. I'll stick with C+ for now. Next up is Tori Diavident Fury Rider. 1 red, white for a 3/3 human knight legendary creature. with Vigilance and Trample. Whenever Tory Davenant Fury Rider attacks, all other attacking creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Other red attacking creatures you control gain Trample until end of turn. And then untap each other white attacking creature you control. So this is actually interesting. I didn't think about that last one. I kind of thought of it as all your white creatures get Vigilance, but your white creatures actually do tap when they attack, which can be good for those effects that are saying when it becomes tapped, something, you get a benefit from that. So that helps this card a little bit more than I was even thinking originally. But this is quite a bit of a beating. It's not yet good enough to pull me into red-white, but I might come up on it. I'm going to give this a C+, and again, this is one that I could see coming into a B- down the line. Yeah. All right. Moving on to Najal the Stormrunner, 2 blue-blue-red for a 5/4 Ifrit Wizard legendary creature. You may cast sorcery spells as though they had flash. Whenever Najal the Stormrunner attacks, you may pay 2. If you do, when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. So 5/4 for 5 base rate is decent. All right. It's pretty good. And then the fact that you can cast sorcery spells as flash is nice, and the doubling or copying an item is big. So yes, paying 2 is kind of expensive to copy, but it's not like you have to pay 2 and then pay the mana cost again. You can pay a mana cost of a card, pay 2, and you effectively get card advantage that way. You're getting 2 of your instant or sorcery. So that's quite nice to have. With all that, because of the card advantage it can give you and its base rate being pretty decent, I'm going to give this one a B-. Yeah, and it'll be interesting. I'm not very much of a blue-red player historically. I tend to find, while I like removal, I tend to find blue-red has a bunch of instants and sorceries that are not what I'm looking for in Limited together as a color pair. I definitely have played it, and I've definitely played some really good decks with it. I've rated now several of the blue-red uncommons as B-, and I'm hoping that blue and red at common in their colors have the support for these, because these cards are looking pretty powerful, and we might get a good blue-red spells deck. So just wanted to mention that. All right, next up is Terakenerod Sky Knight, 2 white, blue for a 3/3 Humanite legendary creature with flying. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/1 white creature, white soldier creature token. It's a little bit understated as a 3/3 flyer for 5. We've seen 3/4 flying for 5 before, vanilla. Obviously, this is still better than those. Those I normally rate as like a C-, D+. This is much better in that it can create extra 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. But I don't know how much better it really is. Given it's a little understated, I'm still looking to rate this as a C. Again, if there's enough blue instant or sorcery support that makes it make sense and really go wide with the 1/1s, maybe this will be better than a C, but I'm going to give it a C right now. That's what I think is most likely. Next up, Zar Ajanan, Scion of Efrava. A lot of these creatures are a little bit of tongue twisters. I will say, I'll interject in here, if you notice, they're like all legendary creatures. That's pretty cool with Dominaria United. We're looking all at like the legends, which also makes sense with the lost legends that have come back. They really nailed the theme of this set. The lore is really cool. The creatures that we're seeing here, all being legendary, are really cool. I just want to mention that. So, for 5 mana, 3 green-white, you get a 4/4 Cat Warrior legendary creature. It has Domain. Whenever Zar Ajanan, Scion of Efrava, becomes tapped, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control with toughness less than the number of basic land types among lands you control. All right. So there's a decent amount of 1/1s flying around, as we saw when we reviewed white. So I do think, first off, 5 mana for a 4/4, a little bit underrated, but not terribly so. And you can enlist this and get everything +1/+1. And if you happen to be playing 3 colors, once you can get this to trigger twice and get a +1/+1 on each creature and then do it again on your lower toughness creatures, I do think this would become quite powerful. The fact that it limits the +1/+1 counters, the toughness that's less than the number of basic lands you control, keeps it in check. So I do think this is just a B-, but I do think it's enough of a pull into green-white. And lastly, we have Bortuk Bonarattle. It's 4 black-green for a 4/4 Troll Shaman legendary creature with domain. When Bortuk Bonarattle enters the battlefield, if you cast it, choose target creature card in your graveyard. Return that card to the battlefield if its mana value is less than or equal to the number of basic land types among lands you control. Otherwise, put it into your hand. Alright, 6 mana for a 4/4 is underrated, underpowered, but the fact that it can draw you your best creature that is 2 mana or 3 mana or less, and put it onto the battlefield immediately, giving it effectively maybe, making it like 6/6 or 7/7 as 2 different creatures and get maybe a really powerful ability on that other creature. And the fact that otherwise you can put it into your hand, that's pretty powerful. I'm going to give this one a B. I like permanents that draw you cards. In limited, you're limited by your cards, and you're also limited by time. I guess I'm just speaking Magic in general, but permanents that get you more cards are really where it's at. You need some of those, and you typically need them, especially later in the game, and this will be a 6-drop that I will be playing in this set to get both of those. Permanent on the battlefield that's decent statted and gets me card advantage. So with that, that covered all of our multicolored uncommons. We will be covering the rares in a single episode of all the rares across all colors, including multicolored. We have an episode for blue, black, red, green artifacts coming on up. I think I might mix artifacts and lands together. And I'll be releasing 2 to 3 videos a day. So keep looking for these and let me know what you think. And until next time, see you soon.